Three takeaways from Atlanta United's 2-0 loss to the New York Red Bulls at Sports Illustrated Stadium in Harrison, New Jersey. Sydney Henry with you as yet again, Henry Atlanta United fall or fail to win at the Red Bulls, and their brief two-match win streak has come to an end headed into the international break. Takeaway number one, let's get into the defensive mistakes. Miguel Marone, well, the mistakes in general, I should say. Miguel Marone, really bad giveaway within the first few minutes of the game, really sets the tone for the Red Bulls. And then they take the 1-0 lead later on, taking 2-0 lead behind Choupo-Moting. And really, that was all she wrote from SI Stadium. This team just, Henry continues to make just these mistakes, just shoots themselves in the foot and puts himself in the hole. Self-inflicted wounds really hurt Atlanta United. Poor service, poor quality. We'll talk about that later on. But, just, again, self-inflicted wounds that hurt Atlanta United and ultimately goes down on a loss.
Yeah, this team doesn't help itself, unfortunately. And that's just an example of it. I mean, 3 minutes in, you're already down because of a really poor ball by Miguel Almiron that gets intercepted. And look, this Red Bull side, they press, and you saw that from the first minute. And so with them giving you that intense pressure, that kind of ball, it's a big risk. And so it just, these mental mistakes have plagued Atlanta, not just this season, but we're going multiple seasons back now. And it put them in the hole tonight. Maybe the result is different if you're not down 1-0 in the third minute of the game.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because immediately I think the heads go down once that happens. And you kind of see it from their posture and their confidence. The passing isn't as crisp. They're panicking when they're on the ball. And we said it before, right? This Red Bulls team, you had to play the game that you were playing before, which was kind of draw in the press and then attack in behind and use the fast players that you have to your advantage. And they didn't really do that. They kind of played in the Red Bulls' hands, kind of playing with the ball, letting Red Bulls kind of sit without the ball and press it off of Atlanta. And then the chances that they got were very transition-based chances. And that's kind of how they managed to score. And so, yeah, it's that mistake, and it's kind of the tactics also sort of going out the window after that point, because I feel like at that point the players were kind of in the mind space of, well, we got to figure out however we can to score. And then there's also the aspect of tiredness, because they've been playing, a lot of these players had played significant minutes already this week, 180 minutes almost for a lot of these guys. So yeah, it's kind of the same old, and plus a road game, which, Atlanta still hasn't won this season. So extra challenging, but they have to limit these mistakes, man. We've said it before. And until they do that, it just feels like this team is never safe from these mistakes.
Yeah, and just before we move on, going back to your point about the turnover by Miggy that led to the opening goal for Red Bulls, I think this kind of PTSD for the team. It's like, here we go again, and we talked about it on the pre-match show. We've seen them, kind of make these mistakes against Cincinnati, against Orlando, and they went after it. They had to drop. They went after it. They kept a clear head, kept a level head, ended up winning those matches. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case tonight against Red Bulls in a place where they have had, outside of playoffs in 2018, absolutely no success. So another non-winning result and another loss at Sports Illustrated Stadium / Red Bull Arena in Harrison. Takeaway number 2, DPs coming up empty again. Latte Lot had a goal called off. We'll maybe talk about that just a little bit. Almiron, of course, the poor giveaway on the opening goal for Red Bulls. And Miranchuk had some moments of promise, but wasn't able to put it together. Of course, he had been in pretty good form for Atlanta United, but has come up empty. I think we're seeing how important it is for your DPs to be clicking. I mean, it's nothing that we don't know already, but tonight just underscored the importance of having your DPs looking like DPs for Latte Lot, it's getting absolutely nothing again. Some of it was self-inflicted, and he did score, like we said. Don't know what the offside was for. Maybe I think there was some speculation that Williams, I know you tweeted out, was maybe a little bit offside, but that's just a tough call to make, immediately after the goal. So I was curious to hear what happened there. Already talked about Miranchuk. Almiron, we already talked about him. I think probably one of his worst games in a uniform, to be honest with you. It's not to rag on Miggy. It's not to rag on Latte Lat. Certainly not to rag on Alexi, but you need your DPs to be a step above. And tonight they weren't, and we've seen that a number of times. You were able to get away with it against Cincinnati, against Orlando to some extent. Of course, Miranchuk featured in those matches, but tonight, just a no-show, really, for the most part, from the designated players.
And part of it could also be the exhaustion factor, because again, these are guys that started the previous two games, started this game, and Miranchuk played 180 minutes already before this game. Miggy played 170. I think Latte Lat was close to that also. And so when you run them out for yet another game, it's always going to be tricky because they have that fatigue aspect on them. They're not at 100%. And I think you saw that in some occasions because some of the lack of runs at some point or some of just them on the ball, they didn't look as sharp. I think that factors into it a little bit, which is why I'm surprised that there was zero rotation in this lineup. And again, we've talked about it, and Ronnie Dyla even talked about it during the week in training, like that the dilemma between rotation and keeping your best 11 and the consistency out there, and it's a hard choice to make. But at the end of the day, I look at Miggy, and again, people are going to say I rag on him too much, but I don't see him bringing a whole lot to this team right now. And, especially in the past few games, he hasn't really given you much chance creation. He hasn't given you anything in terms of goals or assists. He gave an assist for the opposing goal. That's the closest he's come to an assist in his recent games. And I think also, Dyla talked about him having a free role, and I feel like he's been given way too much liberty at this point, because at this point it feels like he's just, Dyla's kind of letting him go, and he's kind of just doing whatever he wants, and I don't think that's the answer. And to an extent, I feel like maybe I feel like in this game you could have rested him, put him on the bench, and started Jamal Tiare, and you probably would have been a little bit better off. And maybe Miguel Almiron coming off the bench against tired legs, maybe he does a little bit better then. It's just trying different things for me. But right now they're all kind of underperforming, the three DPs. And another game without a goal for Latte Lat. Yeah. I'm curious what the linesman saw, that he had no doubt in raising his flag and calling the offside.
Just tight, very tight.
When I looked on the replay, I couldn't see anything. I'll have to go look it back again, but I don't see anyone that touches the ball in an offside position when the ball's played. But either way, that wouldn't have changed the result of the game. It would have still been, a loss. And then Miranchuk, I'll hit on him real quickly. I think he had a couple of decent moments, some touches in the half space again where he seems to thrive quite a bit. I feel like his role was a little bit different in this game though, because I feel like he pressed in more of a fourth. He pressed more as like a right winger in a 4-3-3 than what he'd been pressing as before, which was more of that third guy in the middle. So I feel like his role kind of changed in the game. I'll have to watch it back to be sure, but he looked like he was in a different position at times.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that decision, and how that might have affected his performance a bit. Again, none of the three DPs really kind of shined, quote unquote, in this game. But yeah, you expect more out of that group of players. But hopefully, a week and a half's rest, they can kind of go reset and come back and be ready for the rest of this away stretch and the rest of the season.
Yeah, that takes us to takeaway number 3. I mean, shows what a long way to go this team has before it becomes competitive in MLS. Of course, you have the 2-match win streak. They gave you a little bit of promise as to hopefully this team could get a lengthy winning streak going, especially winning against Red Bulls in place you've never won outside of 2018, leg one of the Eastern Conference Finals. Wouldn't have really mattered in the standings because Charlotte won. If you did win, that is, but now that you've lost again, that even puts you further more behind the 8-ball. Right now, Atlanta are 8 points back of a playoff spot, 8 points behind Charlotte and New York City. Charlotte are in 8th, New York City are in 9th on tiebreak. This is not far from the finished product. Cincinnati, the win against Cincinnati is certainly not the finished product. The win against Orlando is certainly not the finished product. This team's still a long way to go before they can get itself above the playoff line, much less make a top 4, which looks really out of the question at this point. You have a break. Like you mentioned, you have a break. You have a week and a half off. Of course, some players like Almiron, Cobb, they'll be on international duty as well. But for the rest of this team who aren't representing their countries, they have time to take a break, relax, step off the training pitch for a little bit, stretch their legs, and hopefully come back stronger, more focused after the break, because you pick things up back again against NYCFC. That's your next chance to get back on the pitch. Take this time, refocus, rejuvenate, and come back out stronger, because now you have half the season to go, and the margin for error is even more thinner than it was before.
Yeah, it's 17 games left of a 34-game season, so you are literally at the halfway point.
Yeah.
And things don't look great for Atlanta, honestly. Like you said, top 4 is pretty much out of the question. Now it's a matter of, can Atlanta do what they did last season and kind of sneak into the playoffs? And there's still time to do it. Obviously you have 5 road games in a row once you come back from the week and a half break. But there's a few there that I think, they could reasonably be expected to win. I do think, especially around the tail end of it, DC and Toronto are 2 teams that, this team could potentially go and get a result at. And I think if you get those 6 points and then maybe a draw somewhere in there, like, I don't know, against NYCFC maybe, 7 points, I think you're happy with 7 points from this road stretch. You're facing the other teams are Columbus and Miami, and I just don't see them going and getting results there. But then you come home after that, and you have 3 games in a row at home, and they're, you have another chance to kind of reset, is what I'm saying. After this, kind of try to leave behind the other 17 games that you just played and focus on what's up ahead, which is, 17 games in MLS plus at least 3 Leagues Cup games. You're probably done after that because you always are out in the first round. But you have to kind of, I'm going to pull Ted Lasso, but you have to be a goldfish and kind of forget what came before and focus on what you have now. And hopefully that kind of mentality reset can help them power through the rest of the schedule, because you really need to start making up ground. Again, you just said it. They're 8 points back now. They're back where they started before this whole, quote unquote turnaround happened. And the win against Cincinnati and Orlando, you're back where you started. 8 points out of a play-in game. So you need to start making up that ground somehow. Fortunately, you do have a game. You host Charlotte next month. That's a chance. That's a 6-pointer for you, because Charlotte's the one, I believe, either sitting on close to one of those spots, if I'm not mistaken. They're 8th. Exactly. They're floating around that bubble. And so you still have a chance, is what I'm saying. It's not over yet. But this team does need to find some of that cohesion and does need to kind of take what worked from the past 2 games and then fix the other tiny details. Because we've been talking about it, the mistakes, that's nothing new. That's something they've got to work on a little bit. A lot bit, because that happens a lot. Yeah. Kind of fine-tuning the play. Latela, Miggy, Moranchuk, they need to take a step up. They're the designated players for a reason. They need to be the guys for this team. and they haven't really been that this season. Moranchuk had a good run of his past 2 games. Congratulations. Now you got to keep doing it, man.
Yeah.
Miggy and Latte Lot, this team needs you to step up and to do a little bit more. Okay, this is, it's starting to be crunch time, and Ronnie Dylo's looking
already
for
is.
players. Yeah, and Ronnie Dylo's looking for the players that he can count on to get this team back into a playoff spot. And so everyone has to step up at this point.
Yeah.
And no player is too small, I think, at this point, to show that they can fight and they can do something for this team. And it better be soon, or before it is truly too late to make something happen.
Yep. So Atlanta United, again, losing 2-0 to the New York Red Bulls at Sports Illustrated Stadium. Shout out to Sweetword Brewing Company. Thanks for their support of Scarves and Spikes. Go to sweetwordbrew.com for more information. Go to scarvesandspikes.com for our coverage of this match and every other Atlanta United match. Of course, our content throughout the break. Go to patreon.com/scarvesandspikes. Join us there. It's starting at $1.70 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month. Get access to our Patreon and so much more bonus content, I should say. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.